Hello today. I'm going to tell you about a tragedy that shook all of Australia. In a secluded corner of Prospect Farm, the nude body of a woman lay motionless on the lush green grass, her body covered in injuries, blood staining the surrounding area. But what was even more horrifying were her eyes wide open, reflecting sheer terror and utter despair in her final moments. When the police arrived at the scene, even the most seasoned forensic experts turned away, unable to face the horrifying sight. Judges at the time described the case as one of the most brutal and savage murders in Australian history. Public outrage surged, with crowds gathering outside the courthouse, demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty to punish those who had lost all sense of humanity. So what happened? Let's turn back time to 1986 to uncover the tragedy that shook all of Australia. Blacktown is a town located in the western part of Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. It boasts a temperate climate and beautiful scenery, making it ideal for family trips. As a multicultural city, the residents of Blacktown come from all over the world, speaking over 60 different languages, creating a truly diverse cultural fabric. However, between the 1980s and 1990s, Blacktown emerged as a crime hotspot. Gangs operated freely, drug trafficking was rampant, and violence was common, making the area a particular focus for law enforcement. The story we are about to explore today is one of the cases that took place in Blacktown during this dark period. The central figure is Anita Lorraine Cobby, a 26-year-old nurse. She had a cheerful and friendly personality, a beautiful face, a well-proportioned figure, and had once won a regional beauty title. At the time, Anita was working at Sydney Hospital. On February 2nd, 1986, a day that started like any other, Anita, normally punctual, did not show up at work, and her phone was unreachable. Lynn, her close friend and colleague, grew worried and called Anita's parents, only to learn that Anita had not returned home the previous night. Lynn remembered clearly that the previous afternoon, after finishing work at 3:30 p.m., she and Anita went with a few friends to a nearby restaurant to hang out. They chatted animatedly, finishing 2 bottles of wine, and didn't leave until 8:00 p.m. Since Anita's home in Blacktown was quite far from downtown, Lynn drove her to Sydney Central Station to catch the 9:12 p.m. train. Upon arriving in Blacktown, Anita would normally call her father from a payphone to be picked up. But when Lynn contacted Anita's family, she discovered that Anita hadn't called her father the previous night and hadn't returned home either. Gary Lynch, Anita's father, was deeply worried. At first, he thought his daughter might have stayed over at a friend's house since the gathering had ended quite late. But now his daughter had completely vanished. Gary immediately reached out to friends searching all over Blacktown and across Sydney, but found no trace of her. By 6:30 p.m., he had no choice but to report it to the police. Officers quickly launched a search, yet Anita seemed to have disappeared into thin air, leaving no evidence behind. Based on previous cases involving missing women, police suspected Anita might have been harmed by someone she knew. They began investigating her social connections and personal history, hoping to find a clue. Anita was born on November 2nd, 1959 in Sydney. Her father, Gary Lynch, was a graphic designer in the military, and her mother was a skilled nurse. She grew up with a younger sister. Both excelled academically and loved sports, especially surfing. Anita was always the center of attention. Even as a child, she was doll-like and adorable. As she matured, Anita became even more beautiful, with harmonious features, a tall and graceful figure, and a charisma rivaling that of movie stars. In 1979, Anita won a regional beauty pageant. With her looks and talent, she could have easily stepped into the entertainment world. However, she had her own plans. Anita didn't want to rely solely on her appearance for a living. She wanted to do something meaningful, so she followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a nurse at Sydney Hospital. It was there that John Cobby, her future husband, entered her life. Born in 1956, he was 3 years older than Anita. Handsome, with deep blue eyes, golden hair, and a lively, cheerful personality, he was always the joker among his friends. John had a diverse work history, having done everything from laundry and dishwashing to waiting tables. Whenever he earned some money, John would travel, go surfing, and live a carefree life. Later, perhaps having had enough adventure, he decided to settle down and enrolled in a nursing course at the hospital. That's when he met Anita, and it was love at first sight. But Anita's radiant beauty made him feel insecure. He could only watch from a distance, too shy to speak. However, fate often has its surprises. Anita noticed this always smiling young man and was drawn to his humor and energy. She took the initiative to introduce herself. Their first date took place at a Lebanese restaurant near the hospital. After just one meal, sparks flew and they both felt a strong connection. From then on, they frequently met and talked, and gradually their relationship blossomed into a full-fledged romance. After more than a year of dating, John finally mustered the courage to propose, and Anita accepted without hesitation. On March 27, 1982, the talented couple officially tied the knot amid the blessings and admiration of friends and family. Everyone said they were a perfect match. Their married life was sweet and happy. Though Anita sadly experienced a miscarriage, they didn't sink into sorrow and remained full of hope for the future. They kept two adorable dogs, often dined out together, attended concerts, and even bought a small boat to prepare for trips and adventures. In 1984, through a friend's introduction, John began working as a horse trainer. A year later, he hit the jackpot by winning a horse race bet, earning 10,000 Australian dollars, a huge sum at the time. With this windfall, the couple finally went on the world tour they had always dreamed of enjoying, a wonderfully carefree period. In 1985, after spending their savings, they returned home to a quiet life. However, tensions began to rise. John wanted stability, planning to buy a house and have children. Anita, in her 20s, felt her life was just beginning and wanted to pursue more higher education degrees, learning Spanish, traveling, and more. Their disagreements grew, leading to constant arguments. Finally, in early 1986, they decided to separate. Anita returned to Blacktown to live with her parents, and John moved back to his parents' home. After some time to cool off, they decided to meet and talk things through. On February 1st, 1986, they reunited after a period apart. They listened to each other and understood each other's perspectives, better deciding to work together on future plans, willing to compromise to mend their relationship. That evening, Anita went to John's house for dinner to discuss buying a house. They also planned to attend John's sister's birthday party a few days later. Yet, just as everything seemed to be back on track, Anita suddenly vanished under mysterious circumstances. Even more suspicious was John's initial reaction not to search for her, but to buy a bottle of whiskey to take to his father-in-law's house, Gary Lynch. Anita's father, who had already been unhappy with his son-in-law after the separation, now saw him bringing alcohol while his daughter was missing. He grew even angrier, scolding John harshly. John said nothing, turning to go home and sleep. At this point, many people's first reaction would be clear: he must be the perpetrator. The police thought the same, considering John the prime suspect and taking him in for questioning. However, at that moment, an unexpected report shook the investigation. In Prospect, a grassy field south of Blacktown, a farmer noticed his herd of dairy cows gathered in a corner of the field, surrounding something and refusing to leave. Curious, he approached and witnessed a horrifying scene he would never forget. On the grassy field, a naked woman's body lay face down, covered in blood, with hardly an inch of unbroken skin. Terrified, the farmer immediately called the police. A large police contingent quickly arrived at the scene. After a preliminary examination, the forensic team noted that the body had multiple injuries and signs of assault. Even more heartbreaking were the woman's wide-open eyes, as if the despair and pain she suffered were still etched into them. The forensic team concluded that the victim's throat had been cut, and it took about 2 minutes from the injury to death, 2 minutes long enough to feel a torment reminiscent of hell. At that time, the only woman reported missing in the area was Anita. The police removed a gold ring from the victim's finger and handed it to the family for identification. When John saw the ring, he collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, for it was the wedding ring he had personally chosen for Anita. Next, Gary Lynch. Anita's father arrived to identify the body. Trembling, he lifted the white sheet. Seeing his daughter's battered body, the shock was too much, he fainted. When he regained consciousness, he sobbed, "Anita, my daughter." The 26-year-old vibrant young woman had endured unimaginable pain before her life was tragically cut short. On that horrifying night, even the police were shocked by the perpetrator's brutality. Many officers silently vowed to catch the killer and make him pay for his crime. The first step of the investigation was to interrogate John, who had already been a suspect. In the interrogation room, John appeared panicked, his eyes vacant. The police pressed, "Admit it, you killed Anita." At first, John denied it, but facing the officer's increasingly firm stance, he eventually broke down screaming, "Yes, I did it." The ease with which they obtained his confession made the police suspicious. Moreover, John Travers' mental state was clearly unstable, making his statements unreliable. The police then met with Travers' friends. They all stated that Travers loved Anita Cobby deeply. Even when the couple was separated, he still cared for her. Travers could not have killed his wife. Subsequent forensic results completely refuted the police's hypothesis. The injuries on Anita's body indicated that the perpetrator was not a single individual, but a group. Her time of death was determined to be from the evening of the 2nd to the early morning of the 3rd. During that period, John Travers was at his mother's house and could not have committed the crime. It was clear the police had arrested the wrong person. John was innocent. The police returned to the grassy field to ask the farmer if he had heard anything unusual on the night of the 2nd. The farmer recalled hearing a woman screaming from the nearby field but thought it was just a couple arguing, so he paid no attention. The police determined that the grassy field was the initial crime scene. Strangely, after a thorough search, they found no clues. Therefore, the investigation shifted focus to the last place Anita might have been, Blacktown train station. A female officer dressed similarly to Anita Cobby took the 9:12 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown. On the way, she showed each passenger a photo of Anita, but no one could provide useful information. The police also discovered that all public phones at Blacktown Station were out of service. This explained why Anita hadn't been able to call her father that night. Based on the clues, the police formulated a bold hypothesis. Around 9:40 p.m. on the 2nd, after getting off the train, Anita wanted to contact her family but could not find a working phone and couldn't get a taxi, so she decided to walk home. It was very likely she encountered trouble along the way. The police began investigating the route Anita usually took home. However, at that time there were no surveillance cameras, so they could only focus on screening individuals with past sexual offenses or violent criminal records, but they found no breakthroughs. The case seemed at a dead end until early morning on February 4th, when an officer reviewing recent reports happened upon an extremely important detail from the night Anita disappeared. On the street she usually walked home, a young boy reported to the police that he and his sister had witnessed a kidnapping. That night they heard screams echoing along the street. Looking out the window, they saw a girl being dragged into a dirty white car with a gray primer coat. The boy ran outside, but the car had already sped away. Afterwards, the siblings reported it to the police. Soon after, Paul, their neighbor, came home, learned what had happened, and immediately set out with his girlfriend in search of the white car. They found the car near a palm field, but there was no one inside, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary in the field, so they returned home. Additionally, a 16-year-old teenager reported that around 9:45 p.m. that night he heard screams lasting about 30 seconds. Running outside, he saw a white car driving without its headlights on. Through the back window, he saw two men holding a struggling woman. After receiving the reports that evening, the police dispatched officers to search the nearby area, but found nothing. Based on these clues, the police believed the kidnapped woman was very likely Anita. They immediately launched a city-wide search for the white car. However, while everyone was busy with the investigation, another troubling incident occurred. At 9:00 a.m. on February 4th, 1986, A TV host from an Australian network suddenly broadcast Anita's autopsy report live on the morning show, even reading aloud some of the gruesome details. He explained that after reading the report, he was outraged and felt the public should also know about it. So he aired the report without permission. The broadcast immediately shocked the nation. Police phones were overwhelmed with calls. Citizens were outraged by the leak of the autopsy report and horrified by the brutal details of the case. But the most concerned were the investigators handling the case. The nationwide exposure was like shaking a hornet's nest, making the investigation exponentially harder. They immediately launched an internal probe, but couldn't trace the source of the leak. Yet this incident unexpectedly brought a small advantage to the police. People across Australia actively provided tips and donated money to assist the investigation. The New South Wales government offered a 50,000 AUD reward for anyone providing useful information. On May 10, 1986, Anita's family held her funeral. A large crowd voluntarily attended to pay their respects to the unfortunate girl. The most distraught was John, who had previously confessed. During the funeral, he suddenly lost control, shouting, "Don't take her! Please don't take her!" His voice was filled with despair and helplessness before several people finally pulled him away from the ceremony. After Anita's death, John completely fell apart, drowning in alcohol, living day to day in a daze, even wishing one day he might die from an overdose to be with Anita. It was clear he truly loved her, and his previous confession was just the result of overwhelming grief. This funeral was not only a farewell, but also a wake-up call for the entire Australian society. The public's outrage and concern put tremendous pressure on the police. Fortunately, the very next day, the case had a major breakthrough. While reviewing the files, the police discovered that on the day Anita was kidnapped, there had been a report of a car theft. The stolen vehicle was a white car very similar to the one suspected in the kidnapping case. From this lead, the police quickly identified 3 men who had stolen the car: John Travers, Michael Murdoch, and Leslie Murphy. All 3 were known to the police, especially John Travers, a name they were very familiar with. The upbringing of Travers is often cited as a textbook example of a future criminal. His father was an alcoholic, a gambler abusive toward the family, and a drug user. His mother was frail and lacked the strength to guide her children. Travers's primary obsession was harming animals, with numerous reports of disturbing behavior involving sheep, pigs, and chickens. Additionally, he was a sexual predator, frequently using violence to intimidate women and vulnerable-looking men in train stations or public restrooms. Even at just 18, Travers had already been implicated in at least 12 assaults, a true menace. His 2 accomplices, though not as extreme as Travers, were far from harmless. Murdoch, 18, was a loyal subordinate to Travers, spending his days drinking, loitering, stealing, and getting into fights. Leslie, 22, had a fiery temper and multiple arrests for theft. With all 3 having criminal records and recently stealing a white car, the police quickly identified them as primary suspects and moved to apprehend them. During interrogation, the police focused solely on the car theft, not mentioning Anita's case. Murdoch and Leslie remained calm, speaking clearly and revealing no weaknesses. Travers, however, was completely different, either overwhelmed by stress or simply naive. From the start, he blurted out, "I didn't slit her throat." This statement was essentially a confession, as the police had never mentioned Anita being killed in that manner. Travers was immediately taken into custody, while Murdoch and Leslie were temporarily released under secret surveillance. On May 22, 1986, while in prison, Travers became desperate for a cigarette. He asked the police to contact his girlfriend, Catherine, requesting she bring him cigarettes. The police agreed and suggested she cooperate by gathering information from Travers. Catherine immediately complied, wearing a wire when she met him. Travers was completely unguarded, boasting about his violent actions and even grinning while describing the details of Anita's murder. He revealed that on that night, besides himself, Murdoch and Leslie, 2 of Leslie's brothers, Michael Murphy and Gary Murphy, were also involved. After recounting the crime, Travers tried to convince Catherine to help him dispose of the weapon's clothes in the white car. Even more shocking, he plotted an escape, asking Catherine to sabotage the train tracks so a train would crash into the prison, allowing him to flee. If that plan failed, he intended to enlist Leslie and Murdoch to storm the prison with guns. Whether from arrogance or delusion, he believed these elaborate schemes could actually work. The police continued sending Catherine wired to Murdoch's house. From him, they gathered additional details about the crime. After obtaining the recordings, they recovered the weapons clothes and the white car. They then pursued the remaining 2 suspects. Michael, 33, was the eldest of 9 siblings, previously sentenced to 25 years for multiple break-ins, later escaped and was still at large. Gary, 28, had a personality disorder. To his friends, he seemed an honest laborer, but in reality, he had been arrested multiple times for auto theft. With enough witnesses' evidence and confessions, the police moved to arrest the remaining 4 suspects. From the murder of Anita to the arrest of all suspects, the Australian police took only 22 days. Their efficiency was remarkable. The shocking case was finally solved under Australian law. Notably, when police raided Gary's home, he was so terrified he lost control of himself, utterly panicked. During the interrogation using witness testimonies, the police reconstructed the entire sequence of events. On the evening of February 2, 1986, 5 drunk men were driving around the streets. They happened upon Anita, a young, attractive woman walking alone. Driven by impulse, they restrained her, forced her into the car, and quickly left the scene. Inside the cramped car, 5 men took turns assaulting and beating Anita. She fought back desperately. "Please don't do this. I'm married and I'm on my period. Please spare me." But her pleas only fueled their cruelty. They even pressed a knife to her neck to intimidate her. "Shut up or I'll kill you." On the way, they used Anita's money to buy gas and drove to a grassy field to the south. They dragged Anita, barely conscious, out of the car, pulled her over a barbed wire fence, and threw her to the ground, continuing their brutal assault. At that moment, a car pulled up and 2 people got out shining flashlights to scan the area. Seeing this, the group immediately dropped to the ground, covering Anita's mouth. It was Paul and his girlfriend mentioned earlier. They had been very close, just a few more steps, and they could have seen her. Unfortunately, darkness concealed everything. They missed the only chance to save Anita. Still, some argue that even if they had discovered her, the outcome might not have changed, and they themselves could have been in danger. The torment from these 5 devils lasted at least an hour. When Michael Murphy woke up, he began to fear that everything would be exposed. He said to the other 4, "She's seen our faces, heard our names, we can't let her survive." Everyone agreed with the decision, but no one wanted to act first. Finally, Travers used a knife on Anita. After the crime, they quickly left the scene and burned all the clothes they had worn. However, Travers cunningly kept a pair of pants as a keepsake. He had no idea that this item would become crucial evidence, helping the police build a case against him. On May 16, 1987, the trial, dubbed the Trial of the Century by the media, officially began. The 5 criminals were escorted to court amid the outrage of citizens nationwide. Throughout the trial, large crowds gathered outside with banners expressing their anger. They even hung effigies from trees in protest, demanding the reinstatement of the death penalty to punish these evil men. The 5 men faced over 50 charges, including kidnapping, theft, robbery, escape, sexual assault, and murder. Yet they refused to take responsibility, trying every way to evade it. The other 4 blamed Travers for Anita's death to lessen their own sentences. Michael Murdoch's lawyer argued that excessive media coverage could influence the jury and requested a postponement. Gary Murphy's lawyer claimed his client had low intelligence and could not distinguish right from wrong, so he should not be convicted. However, faced with irrefutable evidence, their struggles were in vain. On June 10, 1987, after 54 days of trial, all 5 were found guilty of assault and murder. On June 16th, the Supreme Court of New South Wales sentenced all 5 defendants to life imprisonment without parole. Since Australia had abolished the death penalty, This was the harshest sentence in the country at the time. The case, which had shocked and outraged the Australian public, finally came to a close. During the trial, Judge Allen could not hold back his emotions and choked up, saying, "This is one of the most horrific sexual assault cases I have ever seen." The prosecutors also bluntly stated that Anita's murder was one of the most brutal killings in Australian history. Although the 5 perpetrators received their deserved punishment for Anita's family, the nightmare was far from over. John, after Anita's death, sank into grief and substance abuse. Life had fallen apart for him, but time eventually began to heal the wounds. Finally, John emerged from the abyss. He would often visit the church, sitting quietly by Anita's gravestone, whispering words of remembrance. Years later, he found the courage to marry, have children, and start a new life. But he had changed his name, trying to escape the past. It wasn't until his son reached adulthood that he realized changing his name could not erase the pain. Ultimately, with his son's help, he reverted to his original name and chose to face his past. The pain in Anita's parents' hearts never subsided. They transformed that pain into motivation. Alongside the family of another crime victim, they established a support organization, providing psychological assistance to families who had lost loved ones and helping them rebuild their lives. The organization later partnered with the government to raise 9.4 million AUD to establish a center supporting children, teens, and families who had lost loved ones, offering warmth and hope during their darkest days. Meanwhile, the 5 criminals had to endure endless torment in prison. Travers, after being sentenced, was held in multiple prisons. In 1996, he even attempted a prison break alongside another inmate using window bars but failed. From that point on, he was monitored more strictly. Michael was diagnosed with liver cancer in prison and died on May 21, 2019. Gary was brutally beaten and abused in prison due to the Anita case. On June 25, 2019, he was severely injured in the head by a group of inmates in the prison wood shop and had to be hospitalized in critical condition. The remaining 2 criminals also faced discrimination in prison, living lives filled with punishment. What they endured was perhaps the price they truly deserved. The Anita Lorraine Cobby case had a profound impact on Australia, becoming the subject of numerous true crime documentaries and leaving a lasting impression in film and television. To honor Anita, authorities named a park in Blacktown after her so that everyone on that green land would forever remember the life of the young, unfortunate girl. Let us hope tragedies like this never happen again. Today's video ends here. Goodbye.